App1 is acting as only resource, huh? No, my App1 is doing both. My App1 is doing both. My App1 is doing both. My App1 is providing the service to App2 and my App1 is accessing the service from the IBM. App1 is doing the service for the IBM. You got it? You got my point? Got it? Perfect. So with this we understand how the real-time REST APIs will be developed. With this we understand how real-time REST APIs will be developed. Okay, REST API development architecture. REST API development architecture. REST API development architecture. Okay guys, how we are going to develop the REST API in the real time? Okay, whenever we are developing the REST APIs, sometimes our REST API may need to communicate with the database. Sometimes all the REST APIs may not communicate with the database, but a few REST APIs will communicate with the database. All the REST APIs may not communicate with the database. Okay, now we are using a database. Okay, in order to communicate with the database, we will be having one repository or we will be having one DAO. We will be having a repository or we will be having a DAO. And our REST API will contain service logic also. Our REST API will contain service logic also. And our REST API will contain REST controller also. Our REST API will contain a REST controller also. This REST controller is acting as a resource. This REST controller is acting as a resource. You got my point? REST controller will be available. Other applications, that means whoever want to access our REST API, they will send a request to REST controller and the REST controller will send the response for them. Whoever want to access our REST API, they will send a request to our REST controller. Our REST controller will handle that and will send the response for them. Now our REST controller will talk to service. Service will give some response to REST controller. REST controller will send the response to the other applications. Service may talk to third-party REST API. The service may talk to third-party REST API. If you are accessing some other REST API, third-party API. Third-party API. Sometimes we need to access third-party APIs also. Third-party API means the REST APIs which are developed by other company. Now, my service component will talk to third-party REST APIs also. My REST APIs may talk to third-party REST API also. Then from the third-party REST API, my service layer will get the response. My service layer will get the response. Then sometimes my REST API will communicate with, my service layer will communicate with the repository to perform database operations. To perform the database operations. Then repository will give some response to service. Whatever the response I am getting, I want to keep some data into database and I want to take some data from database. Like this, we will be writing our REST APIs. Like this, we will be developing our REST API. Now, suppose for example, if your application is app 1, your application is app 1, you are acting as a client for the IBM application and you are acting as a resource for the app 2. App 1 is playing both roles. Now, to provide the resources for the other applications, we are writing a REST controller. To provide the resources for other applications, we are providing a REST controller. Now, this REST controller may be accessed by other applications or maybe UI applications. Maybe by other applications or maybe by UI applications. You got my point? Now, if my REST API wants to talk to third-party REST API, we will develop a REST client. Where we will keep the REST client logic in our project. My application is acting as a resource for the other applications. My application is acting as a resource for the other applications, and my application is acting as a client for the other applications also. My application is acting as a resource for other applications, or my application is acting as a resource for the other applications. At the same time, my application is acting as a client for the other applications. Okay. To provide the resources to the other applications, we are using REST controller. Inside the REST controller, I have written the logic. Inside the REST controller, I have written the logic. Now here, I have a service class. Inside the service class, I am going to write the logic, client, web client logic or REST template logic I will use to communicate with the third party API. Then service may talk to repository. Service may talk to repository, and the repository will talk to database to perform the operation. Service will talk to repository will talk to database to perform the operation. Are you guys clear with my point? How we will develop one application which is acting as a resource and which is acting as a client. How we can develop one application which is acting as a resource and which is acting as a client. Now, this REST controller can be accessed by third-party applications. This REST controller can be accessed from another application, third-party app, that means somebody's application, and this application can be accessed from UI also. Third-party application, and from UI also we can access this application. Okay. Now, third-party application can access our REST API, and UI also can access our REST API. This is how the real-time REST APIs will be developed. This is how in the real-time REST APIs will be developed. This is how the real-time REST APIs will be developed. Now, are you getting the clarity how the projects will be implemented? Now, if our REST API, now here you see app 1, app 2 accessing app 1. So to access app 1, there is a REST controller. There is a REST controller. REST controller, why we are writing the REST controller? Other applications can access our application. Other applications can access our application. Now, our application wants to access IBM application, third-party application. When our application want to access third-party application, we will write that client logic in the service layer, business logic. We will write that business logic in the service layer. Web client I will use. Web client I will use in the service layer. Web client I will use in the service layer. So that it can communicate with the third-party API. What is the meaning of third-party API? That means somebody developed that application. Third-party API means somebody developed that application. We are going to access that application. Now, my application is acting as only resource or only client, or it is doing both now? My application is acting as a only resource, or my application is acting as a resource and client? Both. To provide the services to other applications, we are writing the REST controller. To provide the services to other applications, we are writing the REST controller. To provide the services to other applications, we are writing the REST controller. And to access the other applications, we are writing the client logic in the service layer. This is how we will develop layered architecture based applications. In the real time, REST APIs will be developed like this. In the real time, REST APIs will be developed like this. You can write that logic in the service class, or you can write here some other class and you can access from the service. That you can do. So do I need to write the logic, client logic to access third-party API in the service layer? You can write, if you want, you can write in the service, or if you want, you can keep in the separate class and you can call that class in the service. That class will talk to third-party API. Third-party API. You got my point? It's your wish where you want to write the logic to access the third-party API. You may keep it in the service layer, or you may keep in the other class and call that from the service layer. That's it. So this is how in the real time REST APIs will be developed. This is how REST APIs will be developed in the real time. Guys, every REST API will communicate with the third-party API. Every REST API we develop in the project will talk to third-party API. May or may not. It depends upon the requirement. If you have a requirement to communicate with the third-party API, then only you will write the logic to access the third-party API. Now, every REST API will talk to database. Every REST API will talk to database. Some REST APIs may talk with the database. Some REST APIs may not talk with the database. I am giving the conclusions. What we have discussed so far in our course. How these, whatever the concepts we have learned, REST API development, REST client development, where they will be used in the real time, I am giving the conclusion. Are you getting the clear picture now? How APIs will be developed in the real time? Why one API will act as a resource and as well as a client? Why one API will act as a resource as well as a client? I am giving the conclusion, guys. I'm giving the conclusions. Good. Look at the diagram and try to understand. Perfect. I hope you got the picture how REST APIs will be developed in the real time. Can you go through these diagrams and see? Can you go through these diagrams and see? End user will be talking to UI. UI will be talking to backend application. Backend application may have a logic to communicate with the REST API. Conversions will happen to interact from one application to another application. One web application can provide both the C2B service and B2B service also. C2B means customer to business communication. B2B means business to business communication. C2B means customer to business communication. B2B means business to business communication. If you see IRCTC as an example, IRCTC having its own UI, users can interact with the IRCTC application by using their own UI. That means customer to business communication. Users are talking to IRCTC application, booking the tickets, cancelling the tickets and all. That is called C2B communication in the IRCTC. Next one, IRCTC application having some clients also to provide the services. Make My Trip, Yatra, Go Vivo, they are acting as a clients for the IRCTC. That means IRCTC doing both the C2B service as well as B2B service. Now, in the real time, one REST API may act as a client also for another REST API. In the real time, one application can play both roles also. Now, if you see this diagram, we have app 2. App 2 is sending a request for app 1. App 1 is one REST API. App 1 is having a database logic, and the app 1 is communicating with the IBM application also. App 2 is communicating with app 1. App 1 is talking to database to perform some operations, and the app 1 is communicating with the IBM application also. Here, IBM application is a resource for the app 1, and the app 1 is a client for the IBM. So this is clear. But here, app 1 is a client for IBM, and app 1 acting as a resource for the app 2. App 2 acting as a client for app 1, app 1 acting as a client for IBM. So like this, app 1 is playing both roles here. App 1 application is playing both roles here. And the next one, if your application acting as a both resource and client, then how to manage that? If your application acting as a resource and client, then how we are going to manage that? We will develop a REST controller that is a distributed component. REST controller means distributed component. Third party application can talk to our REST controller. Third party application can talk to our REST controller. UI application also can talk to our REST controller. Third party application can talk to REST controller. UI application also can talk to our REST controller. Our REST controller will talk to service. Our REST controller will talk to service. Service may talk to third party API based on the requirement. Service may talk to third party API based on the requirement. And at the same time, service can talk to repository also. Repository can talk to database also. So this is how the real-time REST APIs will be developed. All the REST APIs may not talk to third parties. All the REST APIs may not talk to the databases. It depends upon the requirement. If you have a requirement to interact with the database, then your service will talk to repository. Repository will talk to database. Suppose if you have a requirement to interact with the third-party REST API, in the service component, you will write the logic to communicate with the third-party API, either by using REST template or by using web client. Either by using REST template or by using web client. Okay? Now you got the full clarity how REST APIs will be implemented, how to develop a REST API, how to develop a REST client. Do you have that clarity now? Do you have that clarity now? Swagger, Postman, everything. Swagger, Postman, everything we have implemented. Swagger, Postman, headers, JSON, XML, REST template, web client, synchronous, asynchronous, get request, post request. Several things we discussed in the RESTful services. Now, are you guys confident in developing RESTful services in the project? Are you guys confident in developing RESTful services in the project? Can you develop a RESTful service? Can you consume the RESTful service now? Can you develop a RESTful service and can you consume the RESTful service now? Yes or no? Yes, perfect. Yes, perfect. Guys, with this, our RESTful services concepts are completed. With this, our RESTful services concepts are completed. Okay? Cool. Now next one, we have to start microservices. We have to start the microservices concepts. Got my point? If you know how to develop the REST API, then easily you can develop microservices. In order to develop the microservices, we need to have the knowledge on the REST APIs only. In order to develop the microservices, we need to have the knowledge on the REST APIs. RESTful security I will cover. Don't worry guys, course is not completed. Course is not completed. In the microservices, we are going to develop the REST APIs. We are going to cover the security. Okay, you don't worry about it. I will take care of that security part. Fine. From tomorrow, we are going to start microservices. From tomorrow, we are going to start the microservices. Are you guys clear with this one? Yeah. Profiles we have to explain. Actuators, profiles we have to discuss. Yes, those two things also available. Let's do one thing then. Tomorrow let's talk about actuators. Tomorrow we'll talk about the actuators. Okay? Then we'll complete actuators tomorrow. Profiles also we'll discuss. Then from Monday we will start microservices. In the microservices, I will explain the security. I will explain Kafka. I will explain I will explain Kafka, I will explain Redis, unit testing, I will explain those things in the microservice. So data JPA, I will be planning the next week, guys. Not this week, in the next week I will be planning the data JPA workshop. 2 days, Saturday, Sunday, I will take the free workshop for everybody. Data JPA, I will conduct a workshop. Fine, guys. Fine. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll continue tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Sure. Yeah, layered architecture will implement this kind of REST API in the microservice. Layered architecture will implement in the microservice. Already we have implemented the layered architecture, guys. In the RESTful services also I have implemented. Again, we will implement that in the microservices. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.